Welcome back to Inspire Great Health. I am your host, Bridget Wilson, and I have Dr. Michael Blomquist with me today. How are you today, Dr. Blomquist?
I'm doing good, Bridget. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. So today we're going to be talking about wilderness medicine. So let's just go ahead and start with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell me about your medical history and how you got into wilderness medicine.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Blomquist. I'm a third-year resident at the University of Wyoming Family Med program here in Cheyenne. And my background in medicine, I grew up in kind of a medical family. And when I was choosing a career, I initially went into EMS and worked just south of the border down in Weld County for the paramedic service down there. Did that for 5 years, decided that I kind of wanted to take the next step in my career and went to med school at Rocky Vista University down in Denver. And then when it came time to choose residency, definitely wanted to stay close to I-25. That was kind of the criteria. And I had a really good experience with the University of Wyoming residents as a med student. Getting to rotate there was a really important part of my learning at that time, and it still really is. And so when we decided to go to residency, we picked Cheyenne as number one, and we got it. So here we are.
Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah. And then as far as kind of my wilderness medicine background goes, and so I was really lucky growing up in a very outdoors-minded family. Grew up skiing, hiking, backpacking, hunting, fishing, and doing all of those kinds of things. And so it just sort of naturally, those two things just kind of came together. Whenever we were in the backcountry, it was always sort of my training for my parents of just being like, hey, we always got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. We're here to have fun, but we always got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. And I have memories of little kids of, running into just some inconvenient scenarios, like, transfer cases on trucks going out in the middle of, big snowstorms and all that kind of stuff. And so we just, it kind of was always just part of life was just, if we're going to go in the backcountry, something's probably going to go wrong and we should be prepared for it. And so when I finished college, I went and got a wilderness EMT certification here in Wyoming, actually through Knowles, and then kind of dovetailed that into my EMS experience and really liked kind of being out in the field and doing more field medicine than hospital medicine. But it just kind of stuck with me as an interest. And when I was at Rocky Vista, I was part of the rural and wilderness medicine track there. And so got more training in wilderness medicine and that aspect of it, and have just kind of continued to learn about it as an area of interest of mine. So, yeah.
Well, wonderful. So here in Wyoming, what are some common dangers associated with going out into the backcountry and traveling either alone or with others?
Yeah, so across the board, the biggest share of injuries and problems that we're going to run into are musculoskeletal injuries, bumps, bruises, and hopefully not, but sometimes big traumas. In our neck of the woods, four-wheelers, side-by-sides, horses, snowmobiles, a lot of trauma vectors, as they're called, are popular around here. So we got to be careful about those things. Those are going to be the lion's share of where our injuries come from. And so just, prevention is the number one thing, but being prepared for, anything from bumps and bruises to bigger potential accidents is a really important part. So wear helmets if you're on an ATV or a horse. In your side-by-sides, you got to be wearing seat belts. If you're going into the backcountry on a snowmobile, make sure that you're being safe, going into safe terrain. So that would be kind of the biggest thing, is just avoiding trauma. But sometimes you fall down, roll an ankle when you're hiking, and that can happen too, despite being as well prepared as you can. And so, if you're going into the backcountry, I would always have something to be ready to go for taking care of an MSK injury. And so that can be something like a SAM splint, which is a malleable piece of metal that's wrapped in foam that can help you easily kind of make a splint to stabilize a joint that might be hurt. And then bringing some basic stuff for any kind of wounds to be able to, wrap things, put pressure on things. Those are kind of, I think, some of the essentials to be thinking about when you're kind of coming up with your little med kit to take in the backcountry with you.
Like you said, have fun, but be prepared for the worst.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
We are often miles, potentially hours away from the
Yeah.
nearest hospital. And with it being hunting season,
Yeah.
what are some things that we can do for wound care? Accidents happen. What is the best way to
Right.
stay prepared for wound care until help arrives?
Sure, absolutely. So, we kind of let's look at how serious the wound is, what part of the body the wound is on, and how much time we think it's going to take us to get to a place where we can get definitive care for that wound, being, a hospital or a clinic. And so, for your minor bumps and bruises, just the standard stuff of just making sure that that wound stays clean and dry, making sure that we're doing what we need to do to get it to stop bleeding is important too. And so things that we can do for wounds that are bleeding a little bit more than we would like or not stopping on their own, pressure is key. And so if there's a way, like if it's an extremity, to wrap that extremity, put a lot of pressure on it. And then elevation is always an important thing to help kind of promote hemostasis and get the bleeding to stop. If it's a really big, serious wound on an extremity, let's say you're out getting your firewood ready and you're not wearing your chainsaw protection and you get a big old chainsaw wound, you're going to have to come up with a tourniquet. It would be a good idea if you've got like really strong, stiff, brisk bleeding. That's something that you should really be thinking about. Can we improvise tourniquets? Absolutely, we can. If we don't have one in the backcountry with us, you can take something like a bandana, you can put a stick through it, make a trunnion, and you can just crank that down and tie it. It'll hurt, and you should, not be feeling a pulse in that extremity if you're having to put a tourniquet on it. But that's something that you can do to help stabilize any serious bleeding that might be occurring from a wound at that time. But, if it's along the trunk of the body, you can't obviously, put a tourniquet around your belly. And so in those situations, pressure is the key. Just pressure, pressure, pressure. Wounds on the head and face can bleed quite a lot, but that's just because we have really, really good blood flow to like our scalp. Scalp lacerations always kind of scare people because they really bleed like stink. But again, just putting pressure on it is going to be the key thing there. And then, the other thing we're going to experience probably in the field is dirty wounds. Wounds that, it's like, we wiped out on a mountain bike and there's all kinds of dirt and stuff in these types of wounds. As long as they're really good in hemostatic, not bleeding a lot, rinsing wounds out is really important. And we don't need to, carry a gallon of sterile saline with us or anything like that. Just good old-fashioned tap water or even really, really clean river water can be okay. Things that we have learned from studies in wound debridement is that the solution of the pollution is the dilution. Is that just rinsing it out is the key thing. And there's no risk of getting like giardia in a wound or anything like that. And so, getting really dirty wounds clean can be something helpful to do in kind of that acute phase if you're able to.
Back to the tourniquet. You said
Yes.
it's going to hurt. That's normal.
That is normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
don't freak out if somebody's like, "Ow, that hurts." That's the normal.
It's going to be uncomfortable. And that combined with the pain of just having a wound that's big enough to be bleeding enough to require a tourniquet, that is just not a fun situation. So, it is normal that it hurts, but you want to tighten that tourniquet down till the bleeding stops.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then once you have that tourniquet in place, you really want to leave that tourniquet in place until you can get definitive care.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
If it hurts, you're doing it right.
Yep,
Most likely.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
It's probably going to hurt.
When you're out in the backcountry, what is your number one safety tip?
I would say my number one safety tip is I always make sure that somebody knows where I am and I have someone to check in when I'm going to be back. And that's even if I'm traveling in a party with multiple people. I still, to this day, call my mom and tell her, "Hey, Mom, we're going to go up and we're going to backcountry ski on Medicine Bow Peak. If you don't hear from us by 3:30, 4 o'clock, that's our check-in time. You need to be calling search and rescue and letting them know, hey, they were up skiing Medicine Bow. I haven't heard back from them yet because we don't have cell service back there and those kind of things. And that's really the most important thing is if you're in a really dire situation is having somebody that's on the way to get you, is getting rescued and getting evac'd out of there. And so I would say that's kind of my number one safety tip is always, 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 even if it's just a kind of a small thing, if you're like, oh yeah, I was just going to go for a trail run up in the snowies or something like that, always check in with somebody or have somebody to check in with. So that way they know when you're supposed to be back. The kind of the other tip I have too, and it's just more of a general mindset. There's a quote that I love from Ed Vestas. He's a really accomplished high altitude mountaineer. where he says, summiting is optional, descent is mandatory. And, I know that especially in our neck of the woods, it's not like we're out doing 20,000 foot peaks, but I think that mindset still applies to just about everything that we're going to be doing in the backcountry. If you're hunting that elk, that elk is optional. Getting home to your family is mandatory. And so I think just having that mindset in the backcountry will keep you out of 99.99% of the trouble that you can get into. And it's served me well and served my friends well. We still have a lot of fun, and we still get to do some really cool stuff and really accomplish a lot. But I think just always keeping that in mind is like, hey, that mountain's still going to be there. We can get that elk next season. We're not going to starve, kind of thing. And just keeping that in mind, I think is just a key mindset to have.
Yeah, I love that. Descent is mandatory.
Descent
I love
is
that.
mandatory, yeah.
For those who are interested in learning more about wilderness medicine, if they go out by themselves a lot, or if they just want to protect their families and their friends, what are some additional resources that they can look at for more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was just looking at this the other night. The University of Wyoming actually has courses in wilderness first aid and wilderness first responder, which can be really useful courses if you want to learn more and get some good basic hands-on skills. And so what I like about the wilderness first aid and first responder courses is that they're pretty standardized. And so whether you're doing one here in Wyoming, or if you're doing one in Canada, or if you're doing one on the East Coast, you're going to get the same curriculum. And then you can kind of know if you're working with other people that have had that same course, if you're working together on a wilderness medicine situation, you're all kind of on the same page. And getting the actual scenarios in. And they'll go out and do scenarios where they say, hey, we found a hiker down, and, you practice making a litter to carry somebody out with improvising with hiking poles and jackets and things like that. And I think that kind of experience is really, really helpful. So taking a course, I think, would be something that we could all benefit from. I took a course in wilderness EMS and learned a ton from that course, and would highly recommend something like that, or one of the more abbreviated versions. And then, if you just want to read about it, there's the American Wilderness Medicine Society. They've got information on their website that can link you to different resources, and that's where I've learned a lot of my stuff. There's the classic textbook, Our Box Wilderness Medicine. I think they're on the 6th edition now. That textbook has been out for a long, long time, just full of really good information on wilderness medicine. And then there's conferences in wilderness medicine. In fact, me and a fellow resident are planning on going to a conference in February for wilderness medicine to learn more about it. Okay. So, yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have to have you back and see what's the latest and greatest in wilderness medicine. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you'd like to discuss about staying safe in our wonderful, beautiful backcountry?
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate everything that we talked about, always have a plan, making sure that you have somebody that knows where you are and when you're going to be back and when to check in, and then have that mindset of being like, hey, we're out here to have fun. We don't need to, set a world record today. Descent is mandatory.
Yes.
So other little tips that I have for people, if you're going to be going out in the backcountry, always do some research on the area and get a map. You can get a USGS map. That's kind of the gold standard of the topo map, but there's also a lot of really good online options out there. There's CalTopo, Gaia, OnyxX. There's a whole host of different apps that you can have on your phone that use the GPS that pre-download the map. So even if you're out of cell service, you can have a little bit of navigation. So I think that's really important. Always check the weather. We live in a very volatile weather climate, and that is something that can lead to a lot of injuries in the backcountry of just not having checked the weather and getting caught in a hailstorm or a terrible fog storm like we kind of had this morning.
Yes.
Or something along those lines. So the National Weather Service is a fantastic resource and can give you pinpoint forecasts for certain areas, even in more remote locations. So if you go on the National Weather Service website, you can go to the map, say I'm going to be on this part in the snowy range, and they can tell you with pretty good accuracy what the forecast is going to be for the day. So always check the forecast. Always go prepared with your gear. So make sure that you got extra food, water. Make sure you understand how your gear works, and if it's a piece of equipment that your life is going to be dependent on, like say you're snowmobiling, know how to fix a snowmobile. Always do the basic stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, because if your life depends on that piece of equipment, then you should really know how to fix it too. So that's kind of my other little pieces of advice and things that I think about whenever I'm going in the backcountry. Again, that prevention is a pound a cure kind of mentality. And then, always just have some stuff in your bag to take care of any medical emergencies that come up, things to deal with wounds, things to provide pressure for wounds, things to help keep you warm, all that kind of stuff. And we could do a whole talk.
We could.
Just the gear. So we'll kind of just leave that for later, maybe.
Thank you for joining us today. Those are just some quick tips to stay safe when you're out exploring Wyoming or even other states. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Blomquist.
Of course. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget.
And be sure to tune in next time.